Traumerei vs. Gusting might very well be the most important chess game with an already clear outcome in the history of fiction. This is the definition of it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Traumerei can't win, and everybody knows it, but that does not mean that the game is pointless. I would argue that this is shaping up to be the most necessary game in the tower's long existence. But let's take things back a bit to the start of the chapter. The chapter kicks off with Jurek Magino, whose day just keeps getting worse. Not only did he fail to catch Laslek and Warm, but he also had to turn around and face a literal vortex of Shinsu. At first, Jurek thought Traumerei was done for, finally sleeping with the fishes. But no, Gusting stepped in. He protected Traumerei with the same kind of barrier as we saw Po Bia Richmond use, also known as the fanciest snow globe you will ever see. Naturally, Jurek was confused about how Gusting predicted V's attack, with Gusting simply responding that he knew all of V's tricks because they used to be companions. Jurek then asked if Gusting was going to continue his fight with Traumerei, but Gusting said that they would settle their score like how they initially intended, by playing chess. Meanwhile, the little prick Kuhn was still trying to process Barm's sudden disappearance, but the game was still on, and Bellarare attempted to steal Kuhn's king pieces. Unfortunately for him, unlike Kuhn, Endorsi was paying attention. She pulled up with a kick to Bellarare's face. Then, with the bonbon, she teleported herself and Kuhn away to where Ruck's chess piece was. Kuhn and Endorsi were barely holding on, with Endorsi admitting that she was on the verge of collapse. But there was no time to rest. Bellarare, Rachel and Yuraha were right on their tails. Then, Gusting appeared, casually holding Traumerei's unconscious body like it was a sack of potatoes. Bellarare, being the slimy dirtbag that he is, immediately told Gusting to retrieve the king pieces. But to Bellarare's shock, Gusting declares his plan to finish the chess game himself and makes Kuhn and Endorsi an offer. He will let them through to the room of the great encounter if they give him the Po Bia king piece. But Kuhn had two conditions. In exchange for the Po Bia king piece, the family heads would have to not only accept Barm's freedom, but also help them find Barm, who disappeared with Fuck. Gusting accepted the proposal, so Endorsi and Kuhn left the Po Bia king piece with Gusting and went for the room of the great encounter. Cue Bellarare losing his mind. Our resident sore loser unleashes a barrage of foul language against Gusting, accusing him of betraying the cause to overthrow the family heads. Gusting, being the superior being he is, calmly shuts Bellarare down, saying that he has already lost against these insignificant creatures, and that the distance between them is proof of that. We then see Bellarare absolutely losing it, and he kept screaming at Gusting, and this scene really reminded me of the one from the flashback from chapter 640, when those lesser beings demanded Gusting punish Blossom. Just that this time, Gusting didn't hide his emotions as well. At long last, Kuhn and Endorsi reached the chess table, placing Gusting's king piece down, officially completing the game with 9 minutes and 18 seconds left out of 2 hours. The killing the chess piece arc was finally over, marking the beginning of a new phase. But there is one last piece to the puzzle, the final game. Traumerei awoke sitting across from Gusting at the chessboard. Gusting informed him of his defeat, but conveniently left out the part about V being involved. Traumerei, hilariously disgruntled, took one look at the board and realized he only had the king piece left, while Gusting still had the full team, a rook, a pawn and his own king. Traumerei's response? A dry chuckle, followed by the sober realization that once again he was all alone. In a moment of rare vulnerability, Gusting's monologue revealed the deeper truth about Traumerei. For all his power and all his influence, Traumerei has always been prone to loneliness. And now, as he faces the game that will decide the tower's future, he has nothing left but himself again. Traumerei just looks at his side of the board with nothing but the lone king on it, leans back on his chair and says, "It really suits me, doesn't it? I couldn't imagine a more fitting end for someone like me." And after reading this chapter, I just stood there, thought about it and thought about it some more. and realized something. Po Bia Traumerei is in many ways the most terrifying character in Tower of God. Not because he's the strongest, though he's certainly near at the top, but because of what he represents. He's absolute, almost untouchable and inhumane in a way that no other character quite manages to be. His power is suffocating, his presence overwhelming, and yet beneath all of that, he's a man defined by a single emotion: loneliness. And this is precisely why I think the chess game between Traumerei and Gasteng is so important. Even if we know the outcome of the game, it gives us a much needed time to breathe, to collect our thoughts, and quite possibly it might give Traumerei the chance to really talk with a man he used to see as his dear friend. I expect that the next chapter will allow both Traumerei and Gasteng to really reflect, and I hope that we will see more of Traumerei's inner thoughts, as move by move we get closer and closer to the unavoidable outcome, which is Traumerei's end. Regret and repent. I know nothing of those emotions anymore. It isn't just difficult for us to admit our mistakes, Gasteng, it's impossible. Po Bia Traumerei, Tower of God Season 3, Episode 215. Traumerei's loneliness has finally come to an end, because after thousands of years of unquestioned authority, making everyone around him feel as insignificant as possible, and isolating himself like the world's most emotionally unavailable monarch, he is dead. And honestly, this might just be the most poetic death in Tower of God history. So let's examine the tragic beauty of Traumerei's final moments from the start. We kick things off with the final showdown between Gasteng and Traumerei, not on the battlefield, but over a chessboard. The grand climax of the Sprout arc isn't some massive war between family heads, nor is it an insane showdown of Shinsu techniques. No, it's two men playing chess. Traumerei admits that this is the first time he's played a game where he genuinely can see a path to victory, and thus begins a conversation that is less about chess and more about why Traumerei ended up as this emotionless tyrant in the first place. Gasteng asked if there was ever anyone Traumerei truly cared about. The answer? His children, Lobadan and Kirin. When his first children were born, Traumerei felt a brief sense of fulfillment, but he knew from the start that they would eventually leave him. Then came Wang Wang, who provided a glimmer of hope. Traumerei even gave him the things he treasured the most, like Nen Nen, who was the host of an ancient creature. But then Wang Wang fell in love, and Traumerei, incapable of handling the idea of someone choosing love over loyalty, decided to destroy his own creation out of sheer insecurity. Gasteng, possibly for the first time in his life, seems genuinely fascinated by Traumerei's emotional instability. Traumerei confesses that what he always wanted was to become a god, something beyond emotions, above loneliness and fear. But gods don't feel anxiety. While the loneliness Traumerei had spent his entire life trying to escape only grew stronger the more he tried to suppress it. Gasteng, ever the harsh realist, delivers a brutal truth, telling Traumerei, "You're not a god, you're not the devil, you're just an idiot." And then, with a final crushing move, Gasteng checkmates Traumerei. The match is over. Traumerei has lost. As the winner, Gasteng has now the authority to take control of the Po Bia family. Urek watches in the distance as the arena glows with an ethereal light. The King Piece transforms into the massive administrator who swiftly strips Traumerei of his authority, contracts and protection as a family head. But before that, Traumerei told Gasteng that there is something about Jihad he doesn't know about. But us fans don't get to know what that something is, as SIU intentionally left the speech bubble empty, most likely for dramatic purposes. Anyway, after that is where things take a dramatic turn. Stripped of everything, Traumerei is suddenly flooded with emotions he has spent thousands of years repressing. Joy, anger, sorrow, pleasure, and the most devastating of all, longing and regret. As he regains all those emotions, he begins to cry and sees Amisu. the only one he had truly cared about, the only person who had ever made him feel human. And in a final heartbreaking moment, he didn't scream, he didn't lash out in rage. Traumerei simply whispered his last words. Gustang, I'm so lonely. Then Traumerei activated his rupture ability and took his own life. A family had officially died. However, the official records will state that Traumerei killed himself out of humiliation. But we, the readers, know the truth. This wasn't about pride. This was about a man who realized far too late that he had spent his entire existence running from emotions he could never truly escape. Gustang closed the eyelids of his old friend and delivered some final words on his life. A fool until the end. I hope you find peace wherever you are. As the chapter closes, we get a short but powerful flashback. Amizu and Traumerei standing in a field discussing a single flower that had grown unexpectedly in their territory. Traumerei hated it. It was invasive. But Amizu saw it differently, a thing of beauty, something that could coexist with them. Traumerei reflects that Amizu herself was like that flower, an uninvited presence that somehow made his heart bloom. For once, he had something pure, something that made him feel alive. And he prayed that the day may never come when he had to cut down that flower himself. Traumerei was a man who was both incredibly powerful and deeply, fundamentally broken. And now, in death, he is finally free from the one emotion he feared the most, loneliness. And that is the tragedy of Po Bia Traumerei. A being who spent his whole life trying to be a god, only to die realizing that he was just a man. That was Tower of God chapter 650, one of the most powerful chapters in this series. It gave us the end of a villain who was not just strong, but deeply broken. A man who wanted to be more than human, yet died being more human than ever.